The morning sky over Calathros burned with colors that should have been beautiful. Orange and red light danced across the clouds, but this was not a sunrise. The void wraiths had arrived 3 days ago, and their dark ships hung in the atmosphere. Like black holes eating the light itself, down on the planet's surface, millions of Calithrans ran through their crystal cities. Their blue skin had turned pale with fear. Their large eyes, which usually sparkled with intelligence, now only showed terror. Children cried for their parents. Parents carried their young ones, looking for somewhere safe to hide. But there was nowhere to go. The Calithrans were peaceful people. For over 200 years, they had shared their knowledge with the galaxy. Their scientists had found cures for diseases that killed billions. Their engineers had built clean energy systems that powered entire star systems. Their teachers had educated the children of dozens of alien species. They had never hurt anyone. They had never started a war. They had only tried to help, but none of that mattered now. High above the planet, in the cold darkness of space, ships from every major civilization in the galaxy were leaving. One by one, the great vessels of the Galactic Council powered up their engines and jumped to safety. The sleek white ships of the Asari Republic were the first to go. Their final message was short and businesslike. Resource allocation priorities require immediate withdrawal. The Asari Republic wishes the Calathran people well in their future endeavors. The massive war cruisers of the Zentorian Empire followed next. These ships could have fought the void wraiths. Their weapons could have turned the dark creatures into dust. But the Zentorian admiral's voice was cold over the radio. The Empire has determined that strategic non-involvement is the optimal course of action. We cannot risk our forces for an outcome with such low probability of success. Even the Veth, who had been friends with the Calathrans for over a century, ran away. The Veth were scholars and philosophers, much like the Calathrans themselves. They had shared research and built schools together. Calathran children had played with Veth children. But when the crisis came, even they abandoned their friends. Their explanation was full of big words and complex reasoning, but it meant the same thing as all the others. We are sorry, but we cannot help you. Ship after ship left the Calathros system. The communications channels filled with polite excuses and formal apologies. Some talked about limited resources and strategic concerns. Others mentioned the greater good and difficult decisions. But they all meant the same thing. The Calathrans were going to die alone. In the council chamber, far away on the capital. World of Nexus Prime, the final vote was not even close. The motion was simple. Emergency intervention for the Calathran crisis. The result was overwhelming. 847 votes against intervention, 12 votes in favor, 23 abstentions. The species that voted to help were all small and weak, with no ships that could make a difference. The big civilizations, the ones with real power, all voted no. The council president, a tall gray creature with 6 arms, read the final statement. In a voice that showed no emotion, the Galactic Council regrets the situation facing the Calathran people. However, after careful consideration of all factors, including resource availability, strategic implications, and probability assessments, the Council has determined that direct intervention is not feasible. The Calathran crisis, while regrettable, does not meet the threshold for emergency action as defined by Council regulations. This session is now closed. The holographic display shut off, and the Calathrans were truly alone, except they were not. 1. Ship remained in orbit around Calithros. It was small and ugly compared to the massive vessels that had just left. Its hull was scarred from asteroid impacts and solar radiation. Its weapons were basic and weak. Its crew was tiny. But it stayed. The ship was called the Defiant Hope, and it belonged to humanity. Captain Sarah Chun stood on the bridge of her vessel, watching the last of the alien fleets disappear into hyperspace. Her crew of 37 men and women stood behind her, waiting for orders. They all knew what those orders should be. Earth Command had been very clear. Withdraw immediately. Do not engage. Return to Earth for reassignment. Chun was 42 years old and had been in space for half her life. She had followed orders through 3 different conflicts and dozens of diplomatic missions. She had never disobeyed a direct command from her superiors. She was known for being reliable, practical, and smart. But as she watched the void wraiths descend toward the planet below, something inside her broke. She opened a communication channel to the surface. Her voice was calm and steady as she spoke to the billions of terrified people below. This is Captain Sarah Chun of the human vessel Defiant Hope. We know you are scared. We know others have left you, but we want you to know something important. She paused and looked at her crew. Every one of them was nodding. They knew what she was about to say, and they agreed with it. We are not leaving. The words were simple, but they changed everything. Across the galaxy, other species heard them and stopped to listen. The Calathrans looked up at their sky and felt something they had not felt in days. Hope. Captain Chun continued speaking. We may be just one small ship, but we are here, and we will stay here. We will do everything we can to help you. We will not abandon you. That is what humans do. We stand with our friends. The communication ended, but the real story was just beginning. Captain Chun's words spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. Within hours, every news network was talking about the small human ship that refused to leave. Most alien commentators called it foolish. Some called it brave. A few called it insane. The Asari ambassador to Earth was the first to respond officially. Her message was polite but firm. While we admire humanity's compassion, this action is both dangerous and pointless. One small vessel cannot make any meaningful difference against the void wraiths. We strongly advise immediate withdrawal. The Zenturian High Command was less polite. Their statement was broadcast on all military frequencies. The human vessel is violating established evacuation protocols. Their presence in the combat zone is unauthorized and potentially harmful to any future rescue operations. They must leave immediately. But the message that hurt Captain Chun the most came from her own people. Captain Chun, came the voice of Admiral Harrison from Earth Command. His face appeared on her screen, and she could see the anger in his eyes. You have been given direct orders to withdraw from the Calithros system. Your unauthorized actions are putting your crew at risk and embarrassing humanity on the galactic stage. You will return to Earth immediately, or you will face court-martial for disobeying orders. Shun looked around her bridge. Her crew was listening to every word. These people had families back on Earth. They had careers and futures that could be destroyed by what she was asking them to do. She knew she had no right to make this choice for them. Crew meeting in the mess hall in 10 minutes, she announced. Everyone needs to be there. The mess hall of the Defiant Hope was barely big enough for 37 people. It was a cramped space with metal walls and cheap furniture, nothing like the grand chambers of the alien ships that had just left. But as Chun looked at the faces around her, she saw something that had been missing from all those alien vessels. Real human emotion. You all heard the Admiral, Chun began. Earth Command wants us to leave. The other species think we're crazy. Maybe they're right. We're one small ship against creatures that eat energy itself. Our weapons are toys compared to what the Zenturians have, and even they ran away. Lieutenant Rodriguez, her second in command, raised his hand. Captain, what are our actual chances of making a difference? Chun looked at the tablet in her hands. The ship's computer had been running calculations since they arrived. According to our AI, we have a 0.003% chance of meaningful impact. That's 3 chances in 100,000. The room was quiet for a long moment. Then Ensign Park, the youngest member of the crew, spoke up. Captain, I've been watching the news feeds from the planet. There are children down there. Babies. They're crying because they're scared, and their parents can't protect them. I know, Chun said softly. My little sister's about the same age as some of those kids, Park continued. If she was down there, I'd want someone to try to help her. Even if the chances were bad, Chief Engineer Martinez nodded. My grandmother used to tell me stories about her grandfather. He was a soldier in an old war on Earth. She said he once told her that good people don't help others because they know they'll win. They help because it's the right thing to do. One by one, the crew members began to speak. They talked about their families, their beliefs, their fears. They talked about what it meant to be human. And slowly, Chun realized that she wasn't making this decision alone. Her crew was making it with her. All right, she said finally. Here's what we're going to do. Anyone who wants to leave can take a shuttle to the nearest human colony. No one will think less of you. This isn't your fight unless you choose to make it your fight. Nobody moved. Are you sure? Chun asked. This could end badly for all of us. Rodriguez stood up. Captain, I've served with you for 6 years. You've never led us wrong before. If you think this is important, then it's important. The vote was unanimous. All 37 crew members chose to stay. Chun nodded and activated the ship's communication system. But instead of calling Earth Command, she opened a channel that could reach every human vessel within 50 light years. This is Captain Sarah Chun of the human vessel Defiant Hope, she began. Her voice was steady, but there was passion behind it. We are currently in orbit around the planet Calathras, where millions of innocent people are about to die. Every other species in the galaxy has abandoned them. They say the situation is hopeless. They say one ship can't make a difference. She paused and looked at her crew. They were all watching her with determination in their eyes. Maybe they're right. We know we're small. We know we're outgunned. We know our technology isn't the best. But we also know something that apparently the rest of the galaxy has forgotten. We know what's right. Chun's voice grew stronger as she continued. I'm not ordering anyone to come help us. I'm not promising victory or glory or reward. I'm just asking for help. There are children down on this planet who are going to die if we don't try to save them. Their parents are good people who have spent their lives helping others. They don't deserve to die alone and afraid. She took a deep breath. Any human vessel within range. This is a humanitarian crisis. We need every ship, every person, every idea you can give us. Help us help them. Show the galaxy what humans do when innocent people need us. The transmission ended, and the bridge fell silent. Chun stared at the communication display, watching for any response. For several minutes, nothing happened. Then, slowly, one by one, signals began appearing on her screen. Human ships, scattered across dozens of star systems, were changing course toward Calathros. The first to respond was Captain Torres of the cargo hauler Big Mama. Her message was short. Chun, you crazy woman. I'm 3 days out, but I'm coming. These aliens don't know what they're dealing with. More messages followed. Mining ships abandoned their operations. Transport vessels carrying colonists changed their routes. Even some military ships, against direct orders, began heading toward Calathros. Within 6 hours, 43 human vessels had committed to joining the rescue effort. It wasn't a proper fleet, and most of the ships weren't built for fighting. But it was a start. Chun smiled as she looked at the growing list of allied vessels. Humanity might be new to the galaxy, and they might not have the best technology or the biggest guns. But they had something else, something that apparently mattered more than anyone had realized. They had each other, and they refused to let innocent people die alone. The human ships arrived like a strange parade. They were not the sleek warships that the galaxy expected to see in a crisis zone. Instead, they were cargo haulers with peeling paint, mining vessels covered in asteroid dust, and passenger transports. that had never been designed for anything more dangerous than moving families between colonies. Captain Torres of the Big Mama was the first to reach Calathros. Her ship was a massive cargo hauler that usually carried grain and manufactured goods between human worlds. Now it carried 5,000 emergency shelters, medical supplies, and a crew of volunteers who had never been in a fight before. "Chun, this is Torres," came the voice over the radio. "I brought everything I could grab from the emergency depot on New Brisbane. Where do you want me to put it?" Before Chun could answer, another voice joined the conversation. "This is Captain Singh of the Lucky Strike. I've got my mining crew and enough plasma cutters to slice through a moon. Just tell us what needs cutting." More ships appeared every hour. The passenger liner Sweet Dreams showed up with 2,000 empty beds and a medical bay that had been expanded with equipment donated by every hospital in the Centauri system. The research vessel Deep Thought brought scientists who had dropped their projects to come help evacuate an entire civilization. But perhaps the strangest arrival was the yacht Destiny's Child. It belonged to Marcus Webb, one of the richest humans in the galaxy. The ship was built for luxury, not rescue work, but Webb had packed it with supplies and volunteers. When he contacted the Defiant Hope, his message was simple: "My money won't mean anything if we let good people die. Put me to work." Admiral Reyes watched the growing human fleet from her command ship 3 star systems away. She was supposed to be protecting the border colonies from pirate attacks, but her heart was with the volunteers at Calathros. When her communication officer handed her the latest intelligence report, she made a decision that would end her career. "Helm, set course for the Calathros system," she ordered. "Ma'am?" Her first officer asked. "We don't have authorization to leave our patrol area." "I know," Reyes said calmly, "but there are people who need our help, and we have 3 destroyers that could make a real difference. Admiral, Earth Command will court-martial you for this." Reyes looked at the tactical display showing the human volunteers heading into almost certain death. "Commander, I've been in the service for 25 years. I've followed every order, fought every battle they asked me to fight, and kept every regulation they wrote. But sometimes following orders isn't the same as doing what's right." She turned to face her bridge crew. "I'm not ordering anyone to come with me. Any officer who wants to transfer to another ship can do so now. But I'm going to Calathros, even if I have to take a shuttle." None of her officers moved. Within an hour, 3 of humanity's most advanced warships were racing toward the crisis zone. Back at Calathros, the evacuation was beginning. The human ships worked together like parts of a machine, even though most of the crews had never met before. The cargo haulers used their big cargo bays to carry refugees. The mining ships used their industrial equipment to clear landing zones. On the planet's surface, the passenger liners turned their dining rooms and lounges into temporary shelters. Captain Chun coordinated the effort from the Defiant Hope. Her ship had become the command center for an operation that was growing larger. Every hour, the communications board showed dozens of human vessels working together, sharing resources and information like they had trained for this moment their whole lives. "Captain," reported Lieutenant Rodriguez, "we've got another problem. The human news networks back on Earth are going crazy. They're calling us heroes and villains at the same time. Some people are organizing rallies to support us. Others are demanding that the government arrest us when we get back." Shun nodded without looking away from her screens. "What matters is what's happening here, not what people are saying back home." On Earth, the human government was in chaos. Emergency sessions were called in every parliament and Congress. Some politicians demanded that the unauthorized fleet be ordered home immediately. Others called for official support of the rescue mission. Protests filled the streets of major cities, with some groups calling the volunteers heroes and others calling them dangerous criminals. President Chang of the Earth Federation faced the most difficult decision of her career. In a closed session with her advisors, she listened to arguments from all sides. "Madam President," said Defense Secretary Collins, "these people are violating direct military orders and risking war with the Void Wraiths. We need to stop this before it gets worse." Foreign Secretary Park disagreed. "Madam President, the entire galaxy is watching us. If we abandon the Calathrans now, no one will ever trust us again. And our own people will never forgive us." Chang looked at the reports from Calathros. The human volunteers had already saved over 2 million Calathran lives. But the Void Wraiths were getting closer, and soon there would be fighting. "What are our military advisors saying about the actual rescue operation?" she asked. General Martinez pulled up a holographic display. "The volunteers are doing better than anyone expected. They're not military, but they're organized and they're brave. However, our intelligence shows that the Void Wraiths will reach the planet in 18 hours. When that happens, those civilian ships won't stand a chance." Chang made her decision. "Send a message to Admiral Reyes. Tell her that her actions are officially unauthorized, and that she will face a military tribunal when she returns." She paused and looked around the room. "But also tell her that she has the full support of her commander-in-chief." Back at Calithros, the news of Admiral Reyes' arrival spread through the volunteer fleet like electricity. The 3 human destroyers were not much compared to the massive alien ships that had fled, but they were real warships with real weapons and trained crews. "Admiral on deck," announced Rodriguez as Reyes appeared on the main screen of the Defiant Hope. "Captain Chun," Reyes said formally, "I am here to inform you that your actions are in violation of direct orders from Earth Command. You and your crew will face serious consequences when this is over." Chun stood at attention. "I understand, Admiral." Reyes smiled. "I also want you to know that what you've done here is the most important thing any human has ever done in space. You've shown the galaxy who we really are. Now let's finish this job." The evacuation entered its final phase. 18 hours to move 8 million people before the Void Wraiths arrived. It seemed impossible, but the humans refused to give up. They worked faster, pushed harder, and found ways to do things that their ships were never designed to do. As the first dark shapes of the Void Wraith fleet appeared at the edge of the star system, the last human ship was lifting off from the Calathran surface packed with refugees and hope. The real test was about to begin. The Void Wraiths came like living nightmares. Their ships were not built by any normal species. They were grown, twisted things that looked like they had been torn from the darkest corners of space itself. Black metal curves wrapped around pulsing energy cores that hurt to look at directly. When they moved, reality seemed to bend around them. Captain Chen watched them approach on her tactical display. There were dozens of the creatures, each one the size of a city. Her human fleet looked like toys in comparison. Cargo haulers and mining ships spread out in a defensive line, while the 3 destroyers that Admiral Reyes had brought took position at the front. "All ships, this is Admiral Reyes," came the voice over the communication channel. "We know what we're facing. These things eat energy, so our normal weapons might not work the way we expect. But we're not here to win a war. We're here to buy time for the evacuation ships to get away." The last transports were still leaving Calithros packed with Calathran refugees. Every minute the human fleet could hold the line meant thousands more lives saved. Chun looked at her crew and saw the fear in their eyes, but she also saw determination. "Captain," reported Ensign Park from the sensor station, "the lead Void Wraith ship is targeting us. Energy readings are off the charts. All power to shields." Chun ordered, "And send a message to the fleet. Tell them to spread out and use hit-and-run tactics. Don't let these things get a solid lock on you." The first Void Wraith attack came like a bolt of pure darkness. It struck the destroyer Courage, and the ship's shields flared and died in seconds. The massive warship, which had seemed so powerful when it arrived, was suddenly helpless. "Captain." Morrison's voice crackled over the radio. "Shields down, weapons offline. These things are draining our power faster than we can generate it." "This is Captain Torres of the Big Mama," came another voice. "I'm seeing the same thing. Whatever these creatures are doing, our energy weapons just make them stronger." Admiral Reyes thought quickly. Her military training had prepared her for many things, but not for enemies that fed on the very power sources her ships used to fight. "All ships, switch to kinetic weapons only. Mining lasers, plasma cutters, even ramming if you have to. Anything that doesn't use standard energy weapons." The human fleet adapted with the flexibility that had made their species famous. Mining ships that had been built to cut through asteroids turned their industrial equipment into weapons. The cargo hauler Deep Space Trucker launched its entire load of metal containers at the nearest void wraith, turning cargo into ammunition, but the enemy was too strong. One by one, human ships began to fall. The passenger liner Sweet Dreams took a direct hit and lost all power. Its crew evacuated in escape pods while the ship drifted helplessly toward the planet. The mining vessel Rock Crusher tried to ram a void wraith and simply disappeared. Absorbed into the creature's dark hull. Captain Chun watched her friends and fellow humans sacrifice themselves and felt her heart breaking. "Rodriguez, how many evacuation ships are still on the surface?" 12, Captain. "They're loading the last of the refugees now, but they need another 20 minutes. "We don't have 20 minutes, Chun said, looking at her tactical display. More than half the human fleet was already gone, and the void wraiths were pushing through their defensive line. Then something unexpected happened. Captain Singh of the Lucky Strike, his mining ship badly damaged and losing power, sent a message to the entire fleet. "I've got an idea, but it's crazy. These things feed on energy, right? What if we give them more than they can handle?" "What do you mean?" Admiral Reyes asked. "I mean we overload our reactors, all of them at the same time. Turn every ship into a bomb. It might not destroy these things, but it could hurt them enough to buy the evacuation ships the time they need." The communication channel fell silent. What Singh was suggesting meant certain death for everyone who stayed behind. But it also meant saving millions of innocent lives. One by one, the human captains began to respond. "This is Torres. I'm in." "Captain." "Morrison here. The courage is already dying. Might as well make it count." "Webb here. I spent my whole life making money. Time to spend my life on something better." Chun felt tears in her eyes as she listened to her fellow humans volunteer to die. These were ordinary people who had come to help strangers, and now they were willing to give everything to save lives they had never met. "All right," Admiral Reyes said, her voice steady despite the emotions Chin could hear behind it. "All evacuation ships, this is your final warning. You have 5 minutes to clear the system. After that, we're going to light up this whole area." The last transport ships, heavy with Calathran refugees, pushed their engines to maximum and fled toward safety. Chun watched them go and felt a strange peace. They had done it. They had saved an entire species. "Captain," Park reported, "the evacuation ships are clear." Chun nodded and opened a channel to her crew. "I want everyone to know that serving with you has been the greatest honor of my life. We came here to save innocent people, and we did that. Whatever happens next, we succeeded." She turned to Rodriguez. "Begin reactor overload sequence." Across the human fleet, similar scenes were playing out on dozens of ships. Crews that had never trained for combat were preparing to sacrifice themselves for people they had never met. Engineers pushed their reactors beyond safe limits. Captains recorded final messages to families they would never see again. The void wraiths sensed what was happening and tried to retreat, but it was too late. The human ships had spread throughout their formation, and now they were all beginning to overload at once. "This is Captain Chun of the Defiant Hope," she broadcast on all frequencies, knowing that her words would reach across the galaxy. "Tell them we kept our word. Tell them humanity stands with its friends, no matter the cost." The explosions began. Small, just one reactor failing and taking its ship with it. But as the energy cascaded from ship to ship, the small explosions became bigger ones. The void wraiths, creatures that fed on energy, found themselves drowning in more power than they could absorb. The light from the battle could be seen from 3 star systems away. When it finally faded, the void wraith fleet was broken and scattered, fleeing back into the dark spaces between the stars. The evacuation ships were safe. 8 million Calathrans had survived because a few dozen humans had refused to abandon them. But the cost had been terrible. Of the 67 human ships that had come to help, only 3 survived to tell the story. The galaxy watched in silence as the news spread. 64 human ships had been destroyed. Over 2,000 humans had died. For a species that only had a few 100 million people spread across a dozen worlds, this was a devastating loss. Entire families had been wiped out. Whole communities had lost their best and bravest. But 8 million Calathrans were alive, on Earth. The funerals lasted for weeks. President Chang declared a month of mourning. Cities that had never seen war now had monuments to heroes who had died light years away. Children who would never meet their parents learned their names from history books. The human economy crashed. Nearly 40% of their merchant fleet was gone. Trade routes that had taken decades to establish were broken. Companies went bankrupt overnight. The stock market lost half its value in a single day. But the Calathrans were alive. 3 months. After the battle, the Galactic Council called an emergency session. The Great Chamber on Nexus Prime, filled with representatives from hundreds of species. At the center of the room sat the human delegation, just 5 people representing a species that had nearly bankrupted itself to save strangers. Ambassador Williams, Earth's representative to the Council, sat quietly as the other species argued. Some wanted to expel humanity for their reckless actions. Others wanted to punish them for violating galactic law. A few suggested that humans were too emotional and unstable to be trusted with council membership. The Asari ambassador stood first. The human intervention at Calathros was well-intentioned but dangerous. Their actions could have escalated the void wraith threat to other systems. While we sympathize with their losses, we must consider the greater good of galactic security. The Zentaurian representative was harsher. Humanity acted without authorization and outside established protocols. Their emotional response nearly caused a galactic incident. Such behavior cannot be tolerated from a council member species. One by one, the major civilizations spoke against humanity. They used careful words and diplomatic language, but their message was clear. Humans were too dangerous to be trusted with important decisions. Ambassador Williams listened to it all without speaking. He had prepared a long speech defending his people's actions, but as he heard the criticism from species that had abandoned innocent people to die, he realized that words would not matter here. Then, slowly, the Calathran delegate stood up. Kirith had been a teacher before the crisis. She had spent her life educating children and had never expected to speak before the Galactic Council. But she was the only Calathran who could travel to Nexus Prime so soon after the evacuation. Her blue skin was still pale from the trauma, and her large eyes showed the grief of someone who had lost her home world. "I ask permission to speak," she said in a voice that was quiet but carried clearly through the chamber. The council president, eager to maintain order, nodded. "The delegate from Calathros is recognized." Kirith looked around the chamber at the representatives of species that had abandoned her people. Her voice was steady as she began to speak. 3 months ago, my people faced extinction. The void. Wraiths came to our world, and we had nowhere to run. We sent messages to every friend we had made in 2 centuries of peaceful contact. We reminded you of the medicines we had shared, the technologies we had given freely, the students we had taught without asking for payment. The chamber was completely silent now. Every major species in this council voted against helping us. You had reasons, you had excuses. You had calculations that showed helping us was not profitable, or safe or strategic. You left us to die alone. Kirith's voice grew stronger. But humanity did not leave us. They came with cargo ships and mining vessels and passenger liners. They came with weapons that could barely scratch the void wraiths and ships that were never meant for fighting. They came knowing they would probably die. She paused and looked directly at the human delegation. They came because it was right. The Calathran delegate turned back to face the rest of the council. You sit here today arguing about protocols and regulations and galactic law. You talk about the danger of emotional responses and the need for practical decisions. But I want to tell you what I saw in those final hours on my home world. Her voice filled with emotion, but she continued. I saw human beings loading Calathran children onto their ships, giving up their own seats so families could stay together. I saw human engineers working 18-hour shifts to modify their cargo bays into refugee shelters. I saw human captains who knew they were going to die recording messages for our children, telling them to be brave and to remember that someone cared about them. Tears were visible in her large eyes now. When everyone left us to die, only humanity stood its ground. They did not calculate the odds or weigh the benefits. They did not check with committees or wait for authorization. They saw people who needed help, and they helped. She stood taller and her voice rang through the chamber. Today, 8 million of my people are alive because humans believe that doing right matters more than being safe. Because humans believe that some things are worth dying for. Because humans know that true strength is not about having the biggest ships or the best weapons. True strength is about standing up for others when no one else will. Kirith looked around the chamber one more time. You want to punish humanity for saving my people. You want to expel them from the council for showing you what real courage looks like. Go ahead, but know this. When my children ask me who their real friends are in this galaxy, I will tell them about the species that risked everything to save strangers. I will tell them about humanity. She sat down, and the chamber remained silent for a long moment. Then slowly, the delegate from the small Vorthan Republic stood up. The Vorthan Republic changes its vote. We support humanity's continued membership in the council. The representative from the Kepler Alliance stood next. We also change our vote. One by one, the smaller species began to stand. These were the civilizations that had been ignored and overlooked by the major powers. These were the species that understood what it meant to need help and not receive it. Within an hour, 43 species had changed their votes. It was not enough to control the council, but it was enough to block any action against humanity. The final vote was closer than anyone had expected. Humanity kept their council membership by just 12 votes, but something had changed in the galaxy. The smaller species began to work together more often. They shared resources and supported each other in ways they never had before. They called their alliance the Calathros Compact, after the world where they had learned what real friendship looked like. On Earth, life slowly returned to normal. The economy recovered. New ships were built to replace those that had been lost. But humanity was different now. They had learned something about themselves that would never be forgotten. They had learned that when you stand your ground for what is right, that ground becomes sacred. And they had learned that sometimes the smallest voice in the room is the one that speaks the loudest truth. The galaxy had learned something too. They had learned that humanity did not just stand their ground for friends and allies. They stood their ground for anyone who needed help, anyone who was afraid, anyone who had been abandoned by those who should have protected them. And that made all the difference.